Order, order. Siobhan McDonough to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr Turner. I beg to move that the House has considered the persecution of Ahmadiyya Muslims and other religious minorities in Pakistan. The cornerstone of the Ahmadiyya Muslim faith is its belief in peace and religious tolerance for everyone. Its motto is love for all, hatred for none. However, as we speak, this very same peaceful community continues to be persecuted on a daily basis in Pakistan and elsewhere. It is the only religious community to be targeted by the state on the grounds of faith. In Pakistan, Ahmadis cannot call themselves Muslims and are prohibited by law to vote as Muslims. This state-sponsored persecution has been enshrined in the country's constitution since 1974. On top of this, they are openly declared deserved to be killed, with neither the state nor civic society willing to stand up for Ahmadis against extremists. Perpetrators are given free rein to attack Ahmadis, safe in the knowledge that they won't be prosecuted for their actions.
Mr White.
Thank you for giving away, particularly so early in your remarks, and I would like to congratulate you on securing this very important, not you, the honourable member for Mitcham and Morden. I'd also like to take this opportunity to praise Mohammed Salim in my constituency and other members of the Muslim Ahmadiyya Association who do so much for our community in Warwick and Leamington. And does she agree with me that if Pakistan expects to grow exponentially in terms of economic growth, that they do need to address these serious humanitarian concerns, and particularly the failure by the Pakistani government to legally recognise the Ahmadiyya Muslim community?
Now, that went on a bit long, so let's get a bit shorter. Yes, Ms McDonough.
Can I completely agree with the Honourable Member? This is a thriving, well-educated community that has much to give Pakistan and will do so if they are given the freedom and opportunity.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. And whilst this debate is rightly focusing on the persecution of the Ahmadis in Pakistan, would she also find a way to raise with the Minister the concerns that the Ahmadi community have about the way that they are treated in Bulgaria and also in Indonesia, where similar problems, albeit not on the scale in Pakistan, do exist for the community?
Ms McDonough.
Can I agree with my honourable friend? I will be talking about Indonesia, but not mentioning Bulgaria, which is a very surprising country that should have an issue of this sort.
Mr Tom Brake.
My constituency neighbour for giving way a third time. I'm pleased to hear that she's going to come on to the subject of Indonesia, and particularly what's happened in Bangka in recent days. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to congratulate the Ahmadi Muslim community for the work they have done in relation to the floods, where they have gone up in large numbers to support communities affected by floods.
Ms McDonough.
The community activities of the Ahmadiyya in the UK are extensive, and I'm sure that every member here will have a different example of something that they have done for their own and for other communities. In the last few years, hundreds of Ahmadis have been murdered on the grounds of their faith, 11 Ahmadis in 2014 alone. And this year, a vigilante mob targeted an Ahmadi farm in Gujranwala, setting their home alight and killing 3 family members, a grandmother and 2 little grandchildren. No arrests have been made, and Pakistani news channels refuse to air bulletins about the incident. It is quite shocking to think that the persecution the community face is enshrined in Pakistani law. It is a criminal offence for an Ahmadi to call themselves Muslim, refer to their faith as Islam, call their place of worship a mosque, or say the Islamic greeting, peace be upon you, punishable by imprisonment, a fine, or even death. This is a clear denial of basic human rights for Ahmadi Muslims to freely profess and practice their faith without state interference or persecution. And these laws, specifically against Ahmadi Muslims, also undermine the constitutional right of Pakistani citizens to practice freedom of religion. The state's laws have emboldened other states and extremists to harass, attack and kill Ahmadis. The persecution of Ahmadiyya Muslims operates in many complex ways, as does the persecution of other religious minorities, which I hope we will explore in today's debate. Ahmadis are denied the right to vote. They are disenfranchised unless they declare themselves as non-Muslim. They remain the only disenfranchised group in Pakistan. Indeed, the Electoral Commission of Pakistan has further institutionalised this disenfranchisement. It has decided that Ahmadis can only be permitted to vote under a separate register by self-identifying as a non-Muslim minority and therefore by denying their faith. And while Ahmadis are registered on a separate electoral register, all other communities, whether Muslim, Sikh, Hindu or Christian, are listed on a unified joint register. The requirement of Ahmadis to deny their faith in order to vote has caused the disenfranchisement from Pakistani politics for over 30 years. And worse still, the separate Ahmadi electoral register is publicly available, making it much easier for extremists to target Ahmadis. Ahmadis are also denied the basic right of a fair trial. The vast majority of the terrible offences committed against Ahmadis go unpunished. It is crucial to note that no prosecutions have been brought in relation to any of the killings against Ahmadi Muslims. On top of this, Ahmadis are increasingly being charged and tried for terrorist offences. Take the elderly optician from Rabwah, Mr. Abdul Shakur. Mr. Shakur has been tried and convicted for 5 years under Pakistani Anti-Terrorism Act on false charges alleging the sale of an Ahmadi commentary on the Holy Quran. But Pakistan's anti-terrorism legislation was actually introduced to curb the rise of extreme sectarian violence in the country. It is extremely distressing to learn that this same legislation has been used to convict a 70-year-old member of one of Pakistan's most peaceful religious communities. Then there's Mr. Tahir Mahdi Imtiyaz, an editor of the Ahmadi monthly publication. Mr. Imtiyaz was arrested by police in March 2015, once again on false charges, this time under Pakistan's infamous blasphemy laws. Although the prosecution was unable to provide evidence that Mr. Imtiyaz had included blasphemous materials in his publications, Pakistan's Supreme Court judges rejected his pleas for bail prior to the trial. This was because those in the judiciary still fear of being viewed as being lenient on Ahmadis, and anti-Ahmadi sentiment pervades society. To this day, almost a year since his arrest, Mr. Imtiyaz is still incarcerated with no prospect of bail or trial date in sight. Both Ahmadi men have been arrested and imprisoned on false grounds as a result of the discrimination that is entrenched in Pakistan's justice system. I am sure honourable members will join me in the hope that the UK government will call on the government of Pakistan to immediately release Mr. Imtiyaz and Mr. Shakur. I would be grateful to the Minister if he could outline what the FCO is doing with respect to these two cases later on this afternoon.
On that point, Honourable Friend
Mr. Thomas
draws attention to the immediate responsibilities of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. But given that the aid budget to Pakistan is from the Department for International Development is very heavy, and that DFID has many opportunities for influence too, does she not agree that there needs to be a coordinated cross-government démarche, if you like, to the various levels of the Pakistani government, both at state level and at federal level?
Ms. MacDonald.
I totally agree with the honourable member, and this was just the discussion I was having with I'm trying to find the right phrasing here with the Right Honourable Member Dr. Liam Fox, who expressed his concern the other day to me about that aid is being given to Pakistan and the issues of the Ahmadi community are not being resolved.
Mr. Timms.
And I also want to congratulate her on securing this important debate, and I'm listening with a lot of interest to the point that she's making. The coalition government set up in the Foreign Office an advisory group on freedom of religion and belief. I think that was a welcome initiative. I wonder whether she shares my disappointment that that group hasn't been re-established since the general election. And there's a bit of a sense that this isn't taking the priority that it did have previously.
Ms McDonough.
I'm sure that my right honourable friend had a great input to that kind of initiative, and perhaps we could ask the Minister if he might also address the issue of the reforming of that group under this government later in his speech. The Ahmadi community is also denied the right to religious freedom and expression in Pakistan. On orders from the United Religious Clerics Board, all works by the religious group are now banned in the region of Punjab. This includes books, CDs, periodicals and newspapers, and it means hundreds of thousands of law-abiding Ahmadi Muslims across Punjab face police searches, criminal charges and up to 5 years in prison. But these are all religious texts and their censorship is totally unjustified. Contrast this with the sale of the, and excuse my pronunciation here, Tofia Kodianant, written by an anti-Ahmadi cleric in which he instructs readers not to leave a single Ahmadi alive on earth. The publication is freely available. It seems censorship does not apply to vehemently anti-Ahmadi texts. Sadly, Ahmadis are also the target of several religious extremist groups. The foremost of these is the Khatami Nabawat, whose sole purpose is to eradicate Ahmadi Muslims. Last year, it declared that it's jihad to shoot Ahmadis in the open. But I am sure honourable members will share my own shock that this is the same organisation is a registered charity in the UK, despite the fact that its Pakistan counterpart has these clear links with violence. I hope that the Minister will be addressing the issue later this afternoon. In addition, preachers of anti-Ahmadi hate are also spreading their repellent messages within our own UK borders via satellite TV and the internet. Ofcom has already fined several TV channels, including the Ummah channel, Takbir TV and DM Digital, for broadcasting anti-Ahmadi hatred. This overspill of anti-Ahmadi sentiments is extremely concerning because it's very difficult to police the incitement of hatred and violence against Ahmadis online and across borders. However, the situation needs continuous monitoring here, and the UK government needs to be mindful of anti-Ahmadi hatred pervading its own borders. We do not want the vile anti-Ahmadi messages to be spreading within UK borders.
Mr. Tom Brake.
I wonder whether, like me, she would hope that the work that is now being done by a government unit that's looking at Daesh in terms of tackling some of their propaganda, perhaps the lessons they are learning could indeed be applied to tackling some of the more abusive material that is coming out in relation to the Ahmadi Muslim community.
I'm sure that is a very good suggestion. Certainly the situation here needs continuous monitoring, and the UK government needs to be mindful of anti-Ahmadi hatred pervading its own borders. Many Ahmadi Muslim mosques across Pakistan have been sealed and minarets have been demolished by police under pressures from extremists. Indeed, in May last year, the district of Chakwal ordered the minarets and arch of the local Ahmadi mosque to be destroyed. Ahmadis are even denied dignity in death. Their graves are frequently vandalised without any reference of Islam removed. Anti-Ahmadi sentiment also pervades Pakistan's civic society. The Pakistani Urdu press continues to publish fabricated stories inciting violence towards Ahmadis. This propagates the ideas that Ahmadis are at the root cause of problems in Pakistan. And in 2014 alone, at least 2,000 such reports were published. I do not need to remind honourable members how much publications and stories entrench and normalise discrimination. Meanwhile, Ahmadi students face systematic discrimination in schools and education institutions. This discrimination even extends to the literature students use. For instance, one Sindh textbook teaches children that Ahmadi Muslims are evil and exaggerates that anyone who is or becomes Ahmadi is worthy of being killed. The effect of these examples means that anti-Ahmadi discrimination is entrenched beyond generations. This situation in Pakistan...
Mr. Paul Scully.
Thank you very much, much I'm grateful for giving way, and congratulations. Congratulate the Honourable Lady for securing the debate today. Would she agree with me that in terms of textbooks, DFID actually places a great responsibility on educating children in Pakistan, and so therefore would there be any influence that we may bring to bear as a UK government in terms of the aid that we're giving specifically to education?
Ms McDonough.
I would agree with the Honourable Member that it's certainly something that DFID should be looking at, and I am aware of where grants have been threatened because of the use of textbooks that hold, very difficult and discriminatory messages. The situation in Pakistan overspills beyond its borders and has resulted in so many Ahmadis fleeing to seek refuge. Many have fled to countries like Thailand, where they live in extremely difficult conditions in order to escape the persecution they face in Pakistan. However, the community is being let down in Thailand too. Just last month, the Thai government arrested and arbitrarily detained over 45 Ahmadis and are now seeking to deport them back to Pakistan, where they will inevitably face persecution and even violence. This group includes women and very young children, some of whom have been recognised as refugees by the UNHCR, being detained in terrible conditions. This is despite the fact that Thailand has responsibility under UN conventions. But it seems that the Thai government has forgotten the extreme dangers Ahmadi face if returned to Pakistan, a country they have fled in fear of their lives. I look forward to the Minister addressing this point and outlining what the UK government is doing to urge Thai authorities to permit Ahmadi refugees to stay until the UNHCR complete its due process. And within our own borders, this situation is similarly bleak. Despite the overwhelming evidence demonstrating the persecution and targeted violence faced by this community in Pakistan, the UK is currently in the process of deporting Ahmadi asylum seekers back. This contravenes the UK's own guidance issued just last year. I'm sure the honourable members will join me in being absolutely appalled by the Home Office seemingly accepting the terrible risks faced by Ahmadis who openly practice their faith in Pakistan. I hope the Minister will agree that this position urgently needs to change. At the same time as the Ahmadi community flees from persecution in Pakistan, it faces more and more persecution in other nations. As the Honourable Member from Colshorton and Wallington referred to, in Bangka in Indonesia. Just last Friday, Ahmadis in this region were forcibly evicted from their homes by the police and military authorities as a result of extremists putting pressure on local authorities. Ahmadis were given an ultimatum to either renounce their faith or be forced to leave, and the objections made by the Indonesian Home Minister against the evictions were ignored. As such, Ahmadi families are evicted while mobs who were delighted to see them go cheered. Not only is this example distressing of its own accord, it is also very likely to trigger other such forced evictions, increasingly making Indonesia Ahmadis' refuge making it difficult in the whole country. So what can be done about the terrible persecution faced by this peaceful community? In Pakistan, the situation sadly remains bleak. Despite the many ongoing human rights abuses, Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif stated last month, "I am the Prime Minister of all of you, and it is my duty to help everyone. If anyone is a victim of brutality, no matter what religion or what sect he belongs to, my duty is to help him." Meanwhile, Article 20 of Pakistan's constitution guarantees freedom of religion, and the country is also a signatory to the UN Charter of Human Rights, which makes it obligatory for the government to safeguard the fundamental rights of all without any discrimination, whether it's based on religion, faith or belief. But it is clear that Pakistan is systematically failing to uphold the human rights of all its citizens. The ongoing persecution of Ahmadi citizens undermines Pakistan's progress and its development and stores up huge problems for the future stability of the country. Furthermore, the state's policies allow extremism to flourish, which threatens the security of Pakistan itself, the UK, and of course the rest of the world. What is also clear is that the international community has a moral responsibility to act and apply pressure on Pakistan to abide by international conventions and treaties, in order to uphold the human rights of all. I hope that the Minister will be inspired by this debate today to reflect on the UK's current stance on the issues I've described. It should decide how it will. The government should decide how it will raise the specific issues of anti-Ahmadi laws and corruption that allows extremists to target and murder Ahmadis. It should place pressure on Pakistan to rid itself of its discriminatory anti-Ahmadi laws. It needs to encourage the government to give the peaceful Ahmadi community the right to worship, the right to justice and a fair trial, and the right to practice their religion without fear of persecution, discrimination or violence.
Mr. Thomas, focusing quite rightly on the particular difficulties in terms of respect for their human rights of the Ahmadis in Pakistan. But would she acknowledge that there are many other religious minorities in Pakistan who face the same pressures? Christians, Hindus, indeed certain other forms of Muslims also face persecution that's clearly allowed and tolerated at federal state level, where action is also needed by the Pakistani authorities.
I would completely agree with my honourable friend, and I hope that during the course of today's debate some other honourable members may be concentrating on the problems that other particular religious groups have in Pakistan. The government should be vocal in addressing the situation of Ahmadi community today in Thailand and in Indonesia. It should think about how it will guarantee the UK taxpayers' money will not be used to promote intolerance and extremism in Pakistan. Finally, it should look closely at its own borders and the unfairness of the asylum processes, where it's failing Ahmadi asylum seekers fleeing violence and persecution, forcing them back to Pakistan. Ahmadi Muslims are peaceful and peace-loving, and they give so much to their communities. I am proud that the Borough of Merton is at the UK and worldwide headquarters for the Ahmadi Muslim community. They make an incredible contribution to the richness and diversity of our area. This includes the Baitul Futu Mosque in Morden, which is the largest mosque in Western Europe. The community's impact in this country is inestimable. It has raised more than £2 million for British charities, including regular collections for the Royal British Legion Poppy Appeal, and uses its mosques as blood donation centres, raising 1,000 units of blood in the last year. It also feeds 30,000 homeless people each year and has distributed the peaceful teachings of Islam to 5 million UK homes. I believe that all honourable members should be proud to represent a constituency with an Ahmadi population. But we also have a responsibility as a House to do all we can to give the persecution of Ahmadi Muslims the international visibility it deserves. And I hope that today's debate will inspire the Minister into meaningful action to ensure that the UK plays its part in promoting the vital importance of freedom of religion, not only in Pakistan, but across the world.
Yeah. The question is that this House has considered the persecution of Ahmadiyya Muslims and other religious minorities in Pakistan. Miss Fiona Bruce.
Thank you very much, Mr Turner. It's a pleasure to follow the Honourable Member for Mitcham and Morden and to recognise the content of her excellent speech. The Ahmadis have indeed suffered greatly. Numerous attacks even whilst attending Friday prayers. And the vicious brutality of these attacks is magnified when considering their belief, love for all and hatred for none. How can we ensure that Pakistan's beleaguered minorities receive the help that they desperately need? Well, one way would be for members to read and to send to those in authority a report which will shortly be produced by the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Religion or Belief. That group, just a few weeks ago, held evidence from a number of hearings here in Westminster which revealed systematic and widespread persecution of religious minorities in Pakistan. It heard harrowing personal accounts from Christians and Ahmadis and others who've watched loved ones murdered in a culture of impunity. It heard the story of Pakistan's last remaining Jew, and was moved by the bravery and courage of so many within minority communities. And David Alton, Lord Alton of Liverpool, who chaired those hearings, has said, "We hope the report which will emerge from this evidence will force our policymakers, along with those of other governments, to reassess the way in which we engage with Pakistan." The evidence collated in those hearings will, as I say, be launched in Parliament here shortly and sent to relevant government bodies and parliamentarians and members of the International Panel of Parliamentarians for Freedom of Religion or Belief, which members might not be aware is now in existence in up to 60 countries. Recommendations will be sent to Home Office officials in charge of setting country guidance, who I'm glad to say also attended the hearings, as well as those who look at options for asylum seekers. And we hope too that this report will bring about tangible change in the UNHCR and the Home Office's approach towards minorities facing persecution in Pakistan and their pursuit in seeking asylum. So I do hope that members will look out for that report, which will catalogue how in today's Pakistan, minorities ranging from the Ahmadis, as the Honourable Member has mentioned, to Sikhs, from Christians to Hindus, Buddhists and Muslims, from a Shia tradition, face relentless violence, profound discrimination, and in some cases, outright persecution. Members may be interested, and I hope will be touched to know, that in this very room, only a few weeks ago, the brother of Pakistan's outstanding Minister for Minorities, Shahbaz Bhatti, who was murdered 4 years ago, actually spoke in this room on this very subject. Dr. Paul Bhatti, a medical doctor, said, and I quote, "Since almost the last 2 decades, Pakistan has been facing a series of challenges with religious discrimination and persecution, sectarian violence, economic crisis, political instability and terrorism. Despite anti-terrorism reforms, promotion of religious freedom, support of the international community and precious sacrifices that have been made, not least on the part of his own brother, who spent 28 years of his life promoting interfaith community good relations." Dr. Paul Bhatti went on to say, "Despite the precious sacrifices that have been made, we still face the cruel and harsh realities of violence against weak and voiceless people of our community. We want this Pakistan without any discrimination amongst people of diverse faiths, where the weak and oppressed feel safe and respected. And as the father of our nation, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, said, we are all citizens and equal citizens of one state. This is the path we are following, indicated by Shahbaz. To see our beloved country where there is no discrimination between majority and religious minorities," and he cited Shiites, Sufi Muslims, Ismaili, Ahmadis, Christians, Sikhs, Hindus, Zoroastrians, Baha'i, and so forth. "Each of us," he said, "is on a road, a religious path to a spiritual destination, a place of consequences and accountability for our choices and actions." He had a commitment, as I know so many people do, in this place and across the world, to ensure that Pakistan enjoys peace and stability. And he in his speech in this very room stated, "I am convinced that religious freedom and education together can be the solution in the actualization of world peace." Now, just as his brother, a minister in the Pakistani government, was gunned down, so too, in the hearings that were held just a few weeks ago in this place, members of Parliament heard of the burning alive of a Christian couple by a mob in an industrial kiln in Pakistan. They allegedly broke their legs. Apparently, rumours had circulated that they had burned verses from the Quran. Reports via BBC News NBC News state, their legs were broken, so they couldn't run away. They picked them up by their arms and legs and held them over a brick furnace until their clothes caught fire, and then they threw them inside the furnace. Bibi, the mother, was 4 months pregnant. Their children were forced to watch. If almost 5 years after the death of Shavas Bhatti, his perpetrators have still not been brought to justice, then what chance that the perpetrators who killed these two loving parents will be brought to justice? It is so right that we cry out in this place today on behalf of them and on behalf of so many others who are suffering in this way. I'd now like to turn, if I may, to a very specific point, which is the particular suffering of minority women in Pakistan, women of minority faith groups. And much of the rest of my speech will dwell on this, because they do suffer particularly. And I think it is particularly important that we, as a parliament, note this when we proclaim within our government such a priority on promoting the welfare and well-being of women and girls across the globe. And I know that it is very much a genuine priority of the Secretary of State for International Development, and I recognise and I want to pay tribute to what she has done personally in leading the charge to raise up the support for women and girls in so many countries across the world. I do hope that following today's debate, the UK government and those who are responsible for disseminating aid in Pakistan will pay particular note to the plight of women and girls in religious minorities in Pakistan, because they are doubly at risk of discrimination, and this is regardless of which minority faith they adhere to. They face systematic risks of being victims of abductions, extortion, hijacking, being held for ransom, trafficking, rape, forced marriages, forced conversions, and allegations of blasphemy. Women and girls face discrimination and marginalisation as it is, but they are subject to further targeting if they are from a minority group. As someone said, they aren't just second class, but if they are in a minority group, they are third class citizens. Hindu girls in Sindh and Christian girls in Punjab, for example, are abducted, raped, forced to convert to Islam, face extreme pressure, including threats to themselves and their families. And the majority of Christian women in Pakistan are illiterate and do menial jobs, working in factories or as domestic servants, and face a constant risk of, for example, sexual harassment or physical abuse, forced conversion, and even death. The Asian Human Rights Commission stated in its report of December 2012 that on average, some 700 Christian and 300 Hindu girls are forcibly converted to Islam each year, notably in the Punjab, Khyber, I apologise for my pronunciation, Pakhtunkhwa and Sindh provinces. And it's very interesting that an independent survey in Pakistan cited religious extremism as the greatest threat to the country. District minority committees have failed to review matters for minority women's rights, such as personal laws and rules. And whilst the police are at times complicit in fulfilling the wishes of the local elite, who may be in collusion with extremists, organisations that submitted evidence to the report that I've referred to have stated that police in all provinces are gender blind in case of forced conversion and marriage. They can often effectively be complicit in these activities, nullifying women's previous non-Islamic marriages and recognising their forced marriage instead. In cases of sexual assault, rape and sexual violence, they do not conduct proper investigation, and minority women can be re-victimised because police take bribes and do not adequately protect minority women. All of this has been reported to us. and Christian Solidarity Worldwide report that Christians do not feel safe going to police stations when they have problems relating to unjust blasphemy charges. In October 2015, 3 Muslim men broke into a deaf Christian woman's home in Kashur, Pakistan, taking turns to rape her whilst the men of the family were at work. Despite this crime, the lawyer who is defending this woman admits the difficulty of getting the case to court to punish her perpetrators. The implementation of the Hudud ordinances, laws enacted as part of the Islamization process in 1979, has had seriously damaging consequences on all sections of Pakistani society. Women and religious minorities have in particular been targeted and victimised as a result of them. Notwithstanding the state's commitment of non-imposition of an exclusively Islamic code on non-Muslims, these ordinances, for the most part, control the activities of non-Muslims. Religious minorities under them remain liable to suffer punishments as gross as physical amputations and whipping for various offences, such as theft, whipping and even death for accusations of adultery. Christian women, like other minorities, face persecution and discrimination simply because of their faith. Their real and present dangers for women of non-Muslim faith are direct and substantial. Hindu women face particular difficulties. A key concern for Hindus is conversion to Islam, as well as the target of sexual abuse and forced marriage. This is increasing in recent years. The volunteer group REAL found that between 20 and 25 Hindu girls were forcibly converted every month. And even worse victims are the Dalits, kidnapped or lured into conversion, sexually exploited and then abandoned. There is no legal mechanism for the government to register the marriages of Hindus and Sikhs, causing these women difficulties in inheritance, accessing health services, voting, obtaining a passport, and buying or selling property. Indeed, to avoid abduction and rape of daughters, it's even reported that Sikh families will marry off their daughters at extremely young ages simply to avoid them being abducted or to be involved in forced conversions and rape. Considering the risks women and girls from religious minorities face in Pakistan, we must, Mr. Turner, in conclusion, ask what is being done to support them. As I say, they are not just second-class citizens, they are third-class citizens. And taking into account the fact that Pakistan is one of the largest recipients of our bilateral aid, some £1.17 billion in support from the UK between 2011 and 2015, and whilst recognising the Secretary of State's clear priority to the support for women and girls across all of the countries that the UK provides aid to, we must ask whether our aid is being adequately used to support these women and girls who are being persecuted due to their faith. And I would urge ministers to review how our aid is distributed in Pakistan to ensure that it does not facilitate further persecution of minority women, but helps foster an environment of respect, plurality and freedom for them, and indeed for men of all religious denominations.
Margaret Ferrier.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. It's an honour to serve under your chairmanship. May I offer my sincere appreciation to the Honourable Member for Mitcham and Morden for securing this very important debate. In welcoming this debate, I must make note also of the welcome I have received from the Ahmadi community. I have truly felt humbled at the hospitable and genial reception. In stark contrast, the treatment of Ahmadi Muslims in some other countries is reprehensible. In Pakistan, the Ahmadi population are not simply treated with disdain, they are systematically subjected to discrimination that is very deeply ingrained in Pakistan's laws and culture. When a Pakistani Muslim applies for a passport or other identification, they are asked to sign an oath denouncing the Ahmadi faith. Mohammed Hanif, a BBC journalist, reported in 2010 on this injustice. In his own words, he said, "Like millions of other Pakistanis, I have signed this oath several times without giving much thought to exactly what Mr. Ahmad stands for. I want my passport, and if I have to sign up to a fatwa to get it, so be it." This policy also leads to the disenfranchisement of the Ahmadi population. There is an entirely separate electoral register for Ahmadis, and if they wish to vote, they must deny their beliefs. Our own history has taught us that the principle of universal adult suffrage is an ideal to be upheld. In Pakistan, Ahmadis are treated unequally, subjugated, treated unequally, just as women were in the UK within the last century. Whilst we must take care not to impose our values on others, we cannot stand idly by and watch others denied their right to vote, as set out in Article 21 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Whilst Pakistan has made strides towards ensuring parity of esteem for other religions and denominations, the Ahmadis continue to be singled out and marginalised. They are also endangered by these policies. The separate electoral register not only stigmatises but identifies. Many Ahmadis have been murdered for their beliefs, and government policies that jeopardise their security in this manner are tantamount to the authorities being complicit in these barbarous acts. To put the situation into perspective, around 250 Ahmadis have been murdered since 1984, and not one single perpetrator has been prosecuted. Just what are we doing to address this situation with the Pakistani authorities? What too are we doing to address the other persecutions that Ahmadis are subjected to? In Pakistan, an Ahmadi Muslim can spend up to 3 years in prison simply for calling their place of worship a mosque. If their alleged offence is considered blasphemy, they can even face the death penalty. The law is designed to truly suppress beliefs and to designate Ahmadis as non-Muslims. This flies in the face of Pakistan's obligations as a signatory state of the International Convention of Civil and Political Rights. They have committed to freedom of religion for all, yet place incomprehensible restrictions upon Ahmadis. An example of such repression is that of the publisher of the Ahmadiyya Ansar magazine, who was arrested on false allegation of producing blasphemous material. Tahir was refused bail and has now been imprisoned without charge for the past 10 months. Whilst the shock that we may feel at this could be attributed to cultural difference, it's important to point out that these laws appear to contravene even the Constitution of Pakistan. This affords the freedom to profess religion and to manage religious institutions to citizens, yet this freedom continues to be denied. Reports of graves being desecrated and of burial rights being denied. There have been horrendous massacres at 2 mosques in Lahore, leaving 86 dead. There are reports of arson and other attacks riled up by extremist rallies. Now, whilst Ahmadis are denied the right to peaceful assembly, these hate rallies, unfortunately, do not seem to be subject to the same restrictions. We cannot stand by and allow this to go on. As a fierce advocate, and the Minister knows this, of global human rights, I wish to see a firm stance being taken by the UK government. The Ahmadi community in the UK make an enormous contribution to our society, so we owe it not only to them, but to ourselves to make an effort to right these wrongs. So in summary, I would like the Minister to respond and inform us if the UK government has raised the issue of voting rights of Ahmadi Muslims with Pakistani authorities. If not, I would like the Minister to undertake to do so and to promote the principles of universal suffrage from discriminatory policies and call for it to uphold its obligations as a signatory state of the International Convention of Civil and Political Rights, particularly that of freedom of religion for all. And lastly, what assessment has the government made of the extent of the persecution in Pakistan? How has the UK government pushed Pakistani authorities on the matter of religious persecution? How will the government use its influence to further push Pakistani authorities? And will the government call for an end to the destruction of Ahmadi minarets? Furthermore, will the UK government push the Pakistani government to provide protection once and for all to the Ahmadi community, whose banner is love for all, hatred for none? Thank you.
Mr. Paul Scully.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I'd congratulate once more the Honourable Lady from Mitcham and Morden for securing this debate. It's a real pleasure to serve as Vice Chairman on the APPG under her chairmanship for Ahmadiyyas as well. So it's really good that we've been able to secure and raise these issues here today. My constituency actually abuts Mitcham and Morden. We have a shared border very close to the Beit al-Fatah Mosque. And it's been a pleasure and a privilege to visit that mosque on a number of occasions and meet people, some of whom are here today in the public gallery. When they have, they always speak in such composure and such measured ways under such extreme circumstances with their fellow worshippers in Pakistan and, as we've heard, around the world. But also the adversities that they have suffered and they've seen closer to home as well. It was terrible to actually see the fire in the Beit al-Fatah Mosque just recently. But then they bounced back as a community fantastically well, only looking forward. And my next visit to the mosque was shortly after the Paris atrocities, and it was wonderful and a real privilege to stand shoulder to shoulder with them, demonstrating exactly what they mean by love for all and hatred for none. I will.
Thank the Honourable Member for giving way.
Mr. John Speller.
Also outlining the role of the community here in the UK. And would you join me in condemning those who have been trying to bring persecution and discrimination against the Ahmadi community here into the UK, been trying to boycott some of their shops and also harassing Ahmadis? Should we make clear from this Parliament this has no place in this country?
I'd absolutely agree with the honourable gentleman in raising that point. Hatred and persecution has no place, certainly here in the UK, and this is why we need to lead from the front and then make the case to the government and organisations in Pakistan and around the world as well, but by leading from the front. So it's a point very, very well made.
Thomas.
In the spirit of North and South London solidarity, would he agree with me that one other thing that the Foreign Office could do, in particular in terms of discrimination against Ahmadis, is to raise the discrimination against them that takes place in Bulgaria, a key European Union ally with us, and one which we ought to have very good contacts with, and could therefore discuss this issue repeatedly with them until progress takes place and the discrimination is stopped.
Getting rather long interventions, which should not follow. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. But Bulgaria is an important issue, I know, that has been raised with me as well, and I'm sure the Honourable Member for Mitcham and Morden when we've visited the mosque in Morden as well. So I'm grateful for the Honourable Gentleman for raising that once more, because it is important that these actually do go on the record, our concerns for persecution around the world, especially somewhere quite so close to home. In visiting the mosque and meeting members of the community, we have the Jalsa Salana in Alton coming up and the Peace Symposium coming up, two huge events that the community here organise, and I'm really looking forward to joining them, and I look forward to joining them and saying Salam alaikum, knowing that as a matter of respect, and knowing that they will be able to respond in kind freely, because what the UK does particularly well is religious tolerance. We always need to work at it. We always need to make sure that where intolerance in this country arises, we've got to tackle it. But on the whole, when you compare us to many other countries, we do lead the way. And that's something very much to be welcomed. Now, looking at Pakistan, one of the reasons, as we've been hearing from other members, is that the blasphemy laws are very poorly designed. They're very general and very wide. And so that means that there's a huge, wide interpretation. And that interpretation, as we've heard from the examples that have been given, are being used to persecute and oppress the Ahmadi community. When you've actually heard some of the examples today about the fact that people want to wipe out the Ahmadi community in Pakistan, how can this be in the 21st century? How can this actually, we stand by and let this happen? We've heard as well about the fact that the Ahmadi community in Pakistan are unable to vote. They have to register, declare themselves as non-Muslims and declare the founder of their religion, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, as an apostate and a liar. Well, how can you stand by and let that happen in terms of religious tolerance? We've heard a number of terrible examples of violence, and the violence and arrests have been as recently as November 2015, when a factory and several homes were burnt down, and one in January this year, when a man was killed in Rabwah as well. That's the capital, the centre of the Ahmadiyya community in Pakistan. So there is really no hiding place at the moment when you have such a wide acceptance of oppression and persecution in Pakistan. Now, Pakistan, as we've heard, is a signatory to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. They ratified it in 2010. Last week, or 2 weeks ago, I spent, with a number of colleagues, I spent a week in Strasbourg in the Council of Europe, where that week was talking with the members of the Council of Europe about human rights closer to home. If ever we're going to have any of these agreements, any of these discussions that actually mean something that's just not a talking shop, it's important that we take a lead and we actually make sure that people that sign documents, that ratify documents, adhere to them in everything they do as well. As I say, we cannot stand by in the 21st century and allow a situation where you have a simplistic and oppressive set of laws and set of interpretation of those laws as well to affect a community in such a way. So I ask the Minister and I ask the government, what can we do, what can the UK do alongside the signatories of the ICCPR to push further on this? What can we do with our UK aid to further transparency, to make sure, as was mentioned earlier, about textbooks, that we're using our aid in terms of education as a leverage, if you like, to be able to make sure that religion is taught as widely as possible without the situation that we have at the moment where textbooks are skewed very, very much against the Ahmadiyya community. What can we do to urge Pakistan as well to restore the right to vote and to repeal blasphemy laws? And finally, can we urge Pakistan to prosecute incitement and hate speech against Ahmadis and religious minorities? I asked the Minister this, and I know that I'm actually travelling this evening to Burma when I'm going to be meeting a couple of Rohingya activists. And so the Muslim world, as with any aspect of religion, is a complex one. When you have different denominations and different sects and different groups that disagree on fundamental things, who was the last prophet, who was the true leader of their faith, it's always going to be complicated. We know that. But that's not to say that we can't demand and push for a greater tolerance so that we can live alongside each other, wherever it is across the world. Thank you.
Mr. Jim Shannon.
It's a pleasure to speak on this issue, and can I thank the Honourable Lady for Mitcham and Morden for bringing it forward to Westminster Hall. By doing so, the Honourable Lady has given us all an opportunity to participate in a debate that's very close to our hearts and one that we wish to express our opinions upon. Can I also just declare an interest as a chair of the APPG for International Freedom and Religious Belief, and also a chair of the APPG for Pakistan Religious Minorities. Both those APPGs were just started last year in this term of Parliament as an indication of the need to have them. The APPG on Freedom and Religious Belief has some almost 70 members, members of Parliament and peers of this House, and the APPG and Pakistan Religious Minorities has about 20 or 25. An indication again of the importance of this debate. We've heard many representations over the last period of time. Just in this last time, again, Mr. Turner, if I can just say this. The APPC on religious freedom and belief just in the last term held an inquiry on Pakistan, an inquiry that illustrated very clearly the discrimination that the people here, some of the people here in this audience, and those of us who represent people who have been discriminated against, it's immense, the level of discrimination against religious organisations and individuals in Pakistan. The Ahmadis, the Christians, the Shias, the Buddhists, the Hindus, the Sikhs, the Jews. It is clear to me, indeed to all of us who were involved in that inquiry, and we would hope that the conclusion of that inquiry and the final statement will be made perhaps by the end of February or certainly the beginning of March. And it's clear that the state of religious freedom within Pakistan has become completely inconsistent with Muhammad Ali Jinnah's founding vision to make Pakistan a home for all religions and all religious minorities. It's probably pertinent and helpful to have just a few words of his address to the Constituent Assembly in August 1947. He said then, "You are free to go to your temples, you are free to go to your mosques or to any other places of worship in the state of Pakistan, and you may belong to any religion, any caste or any creed." What a difference from his speech in August 1947 and the realities of it today in February 2016. The Ahmadiyyas they were the first few words of the wording of the motion by the Honourable Lady as put forward asked us to consider them. And let's look at what's happening. Other members have so well illustrated the issues for them, but I'd like to, if I could, just add my contribution to it. The clear discrimination against them, Pakistan's blasphemy laws have fostered a climate of religiously motivated violence and persecution towards them, very focused to a people that we all know. Indeed, the Honourable Lady, the Scots Nationalist lady who spoke before, referred to them as a very gentle people, and they are. They want to reach out to all religions, as we all should from all religions as well. That's what we should be doing, but they do that. And then we have the attacks that take place upon them over the last period of time. The incident of 27th of July 2014, the mob of over 100 people who attacked the Ahmadiyyas, and as a result of that, a woman and her two granddaughters died of smoke inhalation because the mob set fire to their homes, and a woman suffered a miscarriage as well. The police said that they had the names of 420 people, as the Honourable Lady referred to. They were going to bring charges against them. They named 20 of them. But since then, not one thing has happened. So you can understand the frustration that we have here on their behalf of those in Pakistan. And I do believe, Mr. Turner, and the Minister will know this, I believe sometimes we have to be the voice for the voiceless, for those who haven't got a voice, for those who need us to speak on their behalf. Also, from my encounters of what the Christians and other minorities experience in Pakistan, the freedom of which Ali Jinnah spoke of is not the reality we see today. There are many cases of church bombings, mob attacks on Christian communities, rape against women and girls, and the Honourable Lady for Congleton very clearly illustrated that issue. Can you imagine, even begin to imagine the horror for those people, and even attempts of forceful conversion and marriage, and some of those at an early age of 12 to 14 years of age. It's impossible to take it in. In my constituency of Strangford, and I'm very privileged to be the member for there, we have a very good relationship within all religious views in my constituency. We always have had, even through the worst times of the Troubles as well, Mr. Turner. But we have a mosque in Newton Ards, and whenever we had some focus of attention over the last period of time upon them in my constituency, I made it my business to go down and speak to the people in the mosque and reassure them. And I think it's important to do so, and I met them on their Friday as well, when they were having their service, to ensure that they knew that their Member of Parliament was going to speak for them, as he should do and as he would do. Regardless of which minority faith or individual belongs to, they are all subject to similar practices of discrimination and persecution. That's the fact of Pakistan today. The much maligned blasphemy laws, for instance, have been a particular vehicle that has been used against all minorities for egregious violations of religious freedom. All religious minorities have fallen victim to this law, which, as the USCIRF note, inappropriately positioned governments as arbitrators of truth or religious rightness, empowering officials to enforce particular religious views. So very clearly, government in Pakistan uses it for their own ends. The laws also embolden, and they do embolden, extremists to commit violent acts against perceived blasphemers. What in their eyes, and we've seen some of the film illustrations of that, where people in high positions of some of the religions are very violently and aggressively speaking out against other religions, and that can't be allowed to continue. While false accusations of blasphemy have served as a pretext to incite violence and permitting lynch mobs, the Shias community have experienced a number of attacks as well. One that left 20 people dead in February 13, 2015, and dozens injured. Again, their mosques have been attacked by militant groups with a disregard for human life is of serious concern. More recently, some 40 Ismaili Shia Muslims in Karachi in May 2015 marked a new low which has left in sectarian violence, and has left Pakistan's religious minorities fearing for their lives. We've had attacks upon other churches and mosques and across Pakistan, one that left 60 people dead. The Pakistan authorities, I believe, must bring to justice the perpetrators of violence committed in the name of religion in this and many previous attacks, in fair trials and without recourse to the death penalty. In other words, make them accountable under the law, which unfortunately they haven't been, at least not up until now. The British Pakistan Christian Association estimated that about 50% of blasphemy charges are against religious minorities, meaning that, given population size, minorities are 10 times more likely to be targeted by blasphemy charges, and that's a reality. Here's some of the figures, here's some of the stats. Pakistan's National Commission for Justice and Peace estimate over the last 25 years, out of 1,060 blasphemy cases, 450 of them have been against Muslims, 457 against the Ahmadis, 132 against Christians, and 21 against Hindus. Very clearly, and that illustrates where the focus of the persecution of the blasphemy laws are doing against religious minorities in Pakistan. Although Pakistan is yet to execute anyone charged with blasphemy, mob violence often ensues with the accused as well as their families. Local communities and lawyers are targeted, and all too often the laws have been used as an instrument for revenge and personal vendettas. How often this happens, Mr. Turner? Personal vendettas use the religious thing as a per user. We'll get them because it suits our circumstances. Property disputes, political rivalry, marital disputes, and religious differences. They use it sometimes for their own ends, and how can we ever let that happen? As the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan highlight, other state bodies such as the police are fearful, prejudiced, and often, can I say this with real respect, often incompetent in cases of blasphemy. The police fail to properly investigate cases and follow correct procedures. Incidents have occurred where those accused of blasphemy have been killed by the police or prison guards. I mean, where can you be safe if you're not safe in prison from your attackers? If you're not safe from the police from your attackers? I mean, that's the reality of life in Pakistan today, and that's why this debate in Westminster Hall today is so important, and why we're so grateful to the Honourable Lady for bringing it forward and giving us that chance to speak on it. I would like to just make some comments about the persecution of Christians in Pakistan. I know the Honourable Lady for Covington outlined some of those. I perhaps would like to add to them. We have the case of the Christian road sweeper from Lahore who was sentenced to death by hanging. He hasn't been. He was fined 200,000 rupees, and he was also an argument amongst friends that out of some vague information of the blasphemy laws, and then the accusations take place after that. We have the case in 8th of November 2010 when a woman was sentenced to death under Section 295C of Pakistan's Penal Code for allegedly insulting the Prophet Muhammad during an argument with a Muslim lady. And then there was a price put on her head. We have other allegations of blasphemy as well. We have the case of in Lahore, the churches in Lahore, and where 14 people were killed and another 70 injured. And we have also the attack on the church in Peshawar, where some 80 people were killed. All these things add to the to the concerns that we have. Young Christian and Hindu girls forced into marriage at the earliest of ages, as was said before as well. We have the case of the late Punjab Governor, Salman Taseer, was killed by his own official police guard for criticising blasphemy laws, and the killer was revered by thousands around Pakistan. I mean, what is wrong whenever that happens? With the additional rise of mobile communication technology, individuals' photographs can be easily obtained and shared to affiliate extremist groups where perceived blasphemers are suspected to have fled. So there is often no safe haven whatsoever within Pakistan. Pakistan's continuing refusal to reform or repeal the blasphemy laws creates an environment of persistent vulnerability for minority communities, placing all members of such communities at real risk. One of the most brutal spates of violence took place on the 14th of November 2014 against a Pakistani couple, which the Honourable Lady has referred to. The Shama Biba and Shazaz Masid were lynched and burned to death in a brick kiln. The couple were killed by a crowd of some 1,200 who were incited to violence by a false rumour, that was false, that they had committed blasphemy by burning pages of the Quran. Although there were some arrests, most of the mob got away. There's a strong suspicion that those arrested and charged, as is usually the case, will be acquitted free of charge. Their children were left orphans and watched the debauchery and the horror that happened to their parents. This is reality for Christians and other minorities in Pakistan. Discrimination and persecution is at times facilitated by the inaction of police and sometimes even instigated by them. Discrimination in education, discrimination in employment, discrimination in health, discrimination in politics, every level of society. As a Christian, it is particularly worrying that Pakistan is currently ranked 6th on Open Doors' World Watch list of the worst persecutors of Christians, and has been marked as out of 79 out of 100. I tell you, that's a score you wouldn't want to have, Mr. Turner, even in your best results, given that the classification of extreme persecution. USC IRF has also consistently deemed Pakistan a country of particular concern, and that underlines it again. And according to Aid to the Church in Need, Christians in Pakistan find themselves at the centre of a crisis, suffering some of the bloodiest persecution in the country's history, facing ever more calls to abandon their faith, discrimination at work and at home, and attacks on their livelihood. In practice, without the right to freely express their religion in word or action, some Christians feel the government is failing to provide Christians the right to be Pakistani. I conclude with this, Mr. Turner, and I have 3 questions to ask the Minister. What support are the UK government providing Pakistan authorities to ensure the protection of religious minorities across Pakistan? Will the UK government put pressure on the Pakistan authorities to reform the blasphemy laws as a matter of urgency and to provide effective safeguards against their abuse? And will the UK government put pressure on the Pakistani authorities to investigate and prosecute attacks on religious minorities in a thorough and transparent manner? We in this House are charged with to be the voice for the voices, to speak out for those who have them, who can't speak for themselves. Today this House has done that, and we look forward to the Minister's response. Thank you.
Mr. Turner, as we've heard, Ahmadis are peace-loving Muslims, and yet, like other peace-loving people, like our own history of Christianity, and even today, they're persecuted in many parts of the world, and especially in Pakistan, for no other reason than their beliefs. Almost 40 years ago, as we've heard, the Constitution of Pakistan was amended to declare Ahmadis as non-Muslims, to denounce them effectively as heretics, not allowed to refer to their places of worship as mosques, or quote publicly from the Quran. In this country, Mr. Turner, we rightly celebrate the courage of a young woman from Pakistan, Malala Yousafzai, for standing up to gunmen determined to persecute her and other young women for seeking an education. Yet in the town of Rabwah, which I think the honourable gentleman opposite and 1 or 2 others referred to earlier, in the town of Rabwah, young Ahmadi women are forced to suffer in silence as they are often denied opportunities to pursue their studies and even prevented from living in local dormitories. Not surprisingly, as we've heard, in the face of this persecution, many Ahmadis choose to flee to other countries, many of them having settled in Thailand, whereas the Honourable Lady for Mitcham and Morden said a large number have found themselves subject to arbitrary arrest and imprisonment. In Indonesia, a similar pattern of persecution is developing against a community which has lived there peacefully since 1925. And even in Bulgaria, as my honourable friend, the member for Harrow West, pointed out, even in Bulgaria, which is a member of the EU and the Council of Europe, and therefore required to respect religious freedom and human rights, we're seeing that Ahmadis are being prevented from registering as a religious organisation. If anyone wants to know more about the positive contribution of the Ahmadiyyan faith, Mr. Turner, I recommend that they look at the international charitable trust Humanity First, which works across the globe alongside bodies like the Red Cross, Oxfam and Save the Children, offering disaster relief, emergency medical services, Water for Life projects in West Africa, orphan care in places like Indonesia and Burkina Faso. While some governments tolerate terrorists and persecute Ahmadis, the Ahmadiyyan community offers love and help to people across the globe. I've seen the effort and dedication of this community in this country. In Birmingham several years ago, my good friend Dr. Mubashir Salim took me to an old derelict school building in Tilton Road. The Ahmadis lovingly restored it and converted it to the Darul Barakat Mosque, a place where all faiths are welcome and members of the local community are regularly invited to events. It's from here that they organise charity fundraising, events like Ride for Peace, joint faith seminars, sessions for people to donate blood, as well as pursuing their religious worship. But even in Birmingham, Mr. Turner, the Standing Advisory Council on Religious Education permits Ahmadis to participate in the council, providing they don't refer to themselves as Muslims, lest they offend other Muslim groups, thus perpetuating the religious intolerance which forms the basis of the persecution that we've been hearing about in Pakistan. We need to do more to respect the rights of this religious minority, and we need to make it clear that both in this country and in our relations with countries abroad, especially in Pakistan, we're going to stand up to those who are going to persecute this group.
Mr. Nick Dakin.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. And as always, it's a pleasure to serve under your chairing. Can I begin by congratulating my honourable friend, the member from Mitcham and Morden, for securing such an important debate, and which is witnessed by the number of people that are here today taking part from all sides of the chamber. As honourable friends have already said from across the House, the Ahmadis are a group of a faith group which makes huge contribution in this country and internationally. I'm very blessed to have a relatively small Ahmadi community in Scunthorpe who have been involved in a lot of good works in terms of various things in the community, to the benefit of everybody in the community, and I take the opportunity to thank them for that today. But as I also had the privilege and pleasure of joining the Jalsa Salana in 2014, where everybody could see and feel the way in which the Ahmadi people do live the love for all and hatred for none belief that is central to their way of life. And as my honourable friend, the member for Selly Oak, has just pointed out, the Humanity First international work that is done there is an example of the way in which Ahmadis are not only working locally and nationally, but also internationally on behalf of all of us. So they should be commended for that, Mr. Turner, and the fact that they suffer in the way they do in Pakistan in particular is to be condemned. Mr. Muzaffar Ahmad from the local Ahmadiyya community in my constituency said to me recently that persecution of any religious group should be taken seriously and dealt with. If this is not addressed at the source, it can proliferate and reach our country as well. And he went on to say that sadly there have been examples of discrimination closer to home, and obviously in a democratic society such as the United Kingdom that is very tolerant, we address those examples of discrimination and worse, and we deal with it effectively in our own way. But sadly, in Pakistan, the Ahmadi Muslim community is the only religious community to be targeted by the Pakistan state on grounds of faith. Ahmadis have been denied basic rights, the right to life, to vote, freedom of faith and dignity after death. And on paper, the Constitution of Pakistan does not permit discrimination for school admissions on the sole basis of religion, and the Pakistan government, as many members have already indicated, has signed the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which, as honourable members know, guarantees a variety of religious freedoms. However, and I want to focus particularly on access to education, Mr. Turner, to attend school in Pakistan, students must disclose their faith when applying to schools. And this is a hindrance to the ability of Ahmadi Muslims to gain access to education. As I hope everyone in this room and beyond know, education can absolutely transform young people's lives, and to be given a lesser education based on religion is nothing less than appalling. As the Honourable Member for Congleton has already pointed out, there's been particular discrimination of women and girls by the Pakistan state, and women and girls are particularly affected by discrimination because the style of their hijab is distinctive, and this prevents them from participating fully in educational and professional settings, potentially furthering gender inequality in Pakistan. Furthermore, Ahmadi children can be bullied because of their faith in schools, and there is some evidence that schools that have a large number of Ahmadi students are generally assigned teachers who are less effective. All these things affect the quality of education received by Ahmadi students. I want to give a couple of examples, Mr. Turner, which illustrate this discrimination in action. The case of the students in the district Layar serves as a worrisome reminder of how unfounded allegations can result in children being arrested and held in jail for months with no regard for their right to educational welfare. On 28th of January 2009, at Kot Sultan district, Layar, 4 children and 1 adult were accused of blasphemy and arrested under section 295C of Pakistan's penal code, which carries the death penalty. The police arrested the accused without establishing a credible prima facie case, charging them without evidence and before conducting any investigation. The children were accused of graffiti, which defiled the name of the Prophet Muhammad on the toilet walls of a local Ahmadi mosque. The inspector of the case admitted that, quote, the police do not know of any substantial evidence that links the 4 students with the crime, and there was no evidence that anything had ever been written in the first place. The accused children were later moved to DJ Khan prison, and the prison is located a long distance from their hometown, making visiting difficult for relatives. Despite the arrests, many speeches and protests were made to boycott the Ahmadis. Looting and threats of violence took place to the extent that Ahmadi Muslims feared for their lives and were forced to move their families out of the area. And all this took place despite the fact that the 2 men who were the prime movers of the accusation did not bring anything forward of any quality. The children remained unlawfully detained for 6 months before finally being granted bail. And this is just one example of the sort of thing that has been going on and is going on, and that we should condemn. A second example is the removal of Ahmadi Muslim public figures from educational syllabuses. Obviously, the people who are in our syllabuses are partly create role models of achievement and other things. So no educational syllabuses include major Ahmadi Muslim public figures who shaped the history of the country. And Ahmadi Muslims contributed to the establishment of Pakistan in 1947, and prior to the anti-Ahmadi laws, served the country with distinction in every sphere of life. There are a number of such leading figures who are also internationally known for their distinctive service and contribution. For example, two prominent Pakistan Ahmadi Muslims include Sir Muhammad Zafrullah Khan, an instrumental figure in deciding the Pakistani boundary before the partition, Pakistan's first foreign minister and representative of Pakistan before the UN, as well as president of the International Court of Justice at The Hague. So a significant figure. Another prominent yet easily erased figure in history is Professor Abdus Salam, a groundbreaking scientist famous for his work in the field of physics, which awarded him the first Nobel Prize in Pakistani history. So these are people to be proud of, for the people of all faiths in Pakistan to be proud of, and to be included in the literature and the syllabuses and the curriculum that has followed in that country. So there are many more examples of discrimination and prevention of access to education that I could detail, Mr. Turner, but I won't, because I want to be brief. It is important, and I look to the Minister, it's important that we use our leadership role to encourage and ensure that Pakistan allows fair access of people of all faiths to fair education in their country. To be denied that is to be denied a central human right. And a number of members have already pointed out, and the honourable friend, the member for Mitcham Morden, and the honourable member for Sutton and Cheam have already pointed out the importance of the DFID budget and the significant amount of DFID budget that goes to Pakistan. And really, we should ensure that that is not going without a commitment by that state to tackle these deep-seated issues and make sure that all young people, wherever they're from, have proper access to education, and that the Ahmadis are no longer restricted to that access in the way that is currently taking place. So I would ask the Minister, when he comes to respond, if he can indicate what steps the British government is taking to ensure aid isn't being misused by the Pakistani government to promote religious intolerance and discrimination, and how he is using the aid that is being given as an encouragement and as a lever to ensure that these practices that come to our attention too often cease and that proper access is given. And I'd also ask the Minister what steps the British government is taking to ensure that universities in the United Kingdom don't partner with universities in Pakistan who are promoting religious hatred and discrimination within their educational materials or recruitment and admissions procedures. Thank you, Mr. Turner.
Naseem Shah.
Thank you, Chair. Great to your chairmanship, Mr. Turner, and I would reiterate what my colleagues have said and congratulate the honourable member for Mitcham and Morden on securing this debate. Let me start with the words of Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the founding father of a nation, in his first presidential address to the Constituent Assembly of Pakistan, 11th August 1947. You are free to go to your temples, you are free to go to your mosques, or to any other place of worship in this state of Pakistan. You may belong to any religion, caste, or creed. He further moves on, speaking about the history of religious sectarianism, Catholicism, and what's going on here, existing in England, and says, referring to it, thank God we are not starting in those days. We are starting in the days where there is no discrimination, no distinction between one community and another, no discrimination between one caste or creed and another. We are starting with this fundamental principle that we are all citizens and equal citizens of one state. Now I ask those people in this debate, I ask the nation and the people of Pakistan, that 68 years have passed since the independence of Pakistan. 68 years have passed since Muhammad Ali Jinnah made his speech. But where have these freedoms for all people of Pakistan really gone? Where did we start and where have we gone? A nation consisting of 191 million people, according to the latest UN estimates, is now seeing huge human rights violations and abhorrent discrimination targeting 4% of its minority community. Over time, I have spoken in this House against the rise of Islamophobia in Europe and the United Kingdom. Nevertheless, I stand here today as somebody from a minority community, as a proud Member of Parliament, and as a Muslim who can very easily go to my mosque, in fact, go to any mosque belonging to any sectarian denomination with no threat to my life or. I am deeply saddened that as a minority I have all these freedoms, yet minorities in Pakistan, such as Ahmadis, Christians, Sikhs, Hindus and other minorities don't have a religious freedom that Muhammad Ali Jinnah once advocated, but have to instead face religious persecution. This religious persecution that over the years has led to thousands of vile crimes being committed against minority communities. According to only one report by the United States Commission on International Religious Freedoms, between January 2013 and June 2013, in just 6 months, there were a total of 108 attacks on minority, leading to 82 deaths. From those killed, 22 were Ahmadis, 11 Christians, 2 Hindus, 1 Sikh, and 16 from other minority groups. However, it has to be made clear, with the fight against the war on terror in Pakistan, the rise in extremism and the questionable implications of outside factors funding this extremism through the teaching systems within some madrasas, it has further intensified the persecution against minority communities. When we take a look at the Shia community, a recognised Muslim minority community by the state of Pakistan, yet sectarianism and extremism has led to heinous crimes being committed against them. The South Asian Terrorism Portal founded that Shia killings from 2002 to 2013 totaled 2,086 people. What is more worrying is the fact that, according to this data, in 2002 and 2003, there were 6 and 2 Shias killed in the sectarian hate, whereas there were 399 and 410 Shias killed in 2012 and 13. Clearly, we can see a rising level of hate, but one of the biggest concerns is that the rising level of extremism is leading to further extremist groups declaring the Shia community as non-Muslims and as heretics, for they are recognised by the state for being Muslims, and thus validating them for wajibul qatl, deserving to be killed. If this is the case, and the level of persecution of a community recognised by the state, one can only imagine the conditions of fear and terror other minority communities are living within Pakistan today. This week, Chair, we have seen many events across this Parliament and across the country by my Pakistani brothers and sisters, and talking about the official holiday in Pakistan to represent the solidarity with the Kashmiris. And I've spoken in many of them, and I will reiterate and say again that if we are to stand for the persecution and the freedoms of the Kashmiris, we must also stand against the persecution of any minority. If you are on the side of justice, it does not matter whether you are religious, of no religion, of what colour, of what gender, of what race, caste or creed. We must speak against it all. To end, I believe the state of Pakistan has gone through some challenges, especially with tackling terrorism and extremism, to which the armed forces and the people of Pakistan have sacrificed thousands of their lives fighting against. Nevertheless, we must all stand together against all forms of hate and persecution. And I would welcome Pakistan and encourage Pakistan through this address to perhaps hold a religious minority conference with hundreds of world scholars of likes which took place in Marrakesh only in the last few weeks. Finally, as a minority benefiting with all the religious freedoms in my homeland of Great Britain, I just cannot stand here and watch minorities have their freedoms discriminated against in my motherland. And as Pakistan is an Islamic state, I will, for the second time in this chamber, use my religion, and I will quote the verse of Ayah 256 of Surah Al-Baqarah in the Quran. There is no compulsion in religion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Brady. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship and welcome you to the chair, Mr Turner having departed. It's a pleasure to be able to speak in this debate, and I'm very, very grateful to the member for Mitcham and Morden for securing the debate today. It's also a real pleasure to follow the member from Bradford West, who spoke very passionately and knowledgeably about this issue. I'm delighted to have the Ahmadiyya community in my own constituency of Glasgow Central at the Batir Rahman Mosque in York Hill. The community there are an absolute model in terms of the work they do in reaching out to the wider community. They do regular community clean-ups, they hold events to raise funds for York Hill Children's Charity, and indeed one of the first events that I got invited to as an MP was to come and set off the race and to run in the race, the 5k race that they held in Kelvin Grove Park. And it was an absolute pleasure to run alongside them and to help at that event. They also hold dinners to celebrate and to invite in their neighbours of all faiths and of none for discussions and to talk about peace. They even once provided pakora to my campaign team when we set up our stall nearby, so they definitely have a place in my heart. They could not be more welcoming. I was also very pleased and honoured to be asked to visit their Jalsa Salana event at Alton over the summer, where I found out a good deal more about the Ahmadiyya community around the world and the humanitarian and education work I was involved in. It was a very, very impressive event and also reflected the way they reach out to other faiths and bring other people in to find out more about what they do. What I also found out on that visit and in my continued dealings with the Ahmadiyya community is the severe persecution that they face. Despite adhering to many of the core tenets of the Islamic faith, including the 5 pillars of Islam and the 6 articles of belief, the Ahmadiyya Muslims have been subject to persecution across the globe. I'm disturbed particularly at the level of this and the scale of this in Pakistan, a country with which the UK and Scotland have many close links. In Pakistan, as has been said, Ahmadiyya Muslims are not recognised as Muslims by the country's constitution and are therefore denied their fundamental rights, such as the right to vote and of freedom of religion. They've been persecuted, but the state has also enabled that persecution by not protecting Ahmadiyya Muslims under the law and in clear violation of international human rights obligations. I wish to touch on the issue of access to justice in particular. In Pakistan, as has been said, since 1974, Ahmadiyya Muslims have not been recognised since the Constitution, and since 1984, the Penal Code makes it a crime for Ahmadis to self-identify as Muslims. This means that in practice, should an Ahmadi Muslim face a religiously motivated attack, they would be incriminating themselves by even going to report that. Specifically, Section 298C of the Pakistan Penal Code states that persons of Qadani group or the Lahori group who call themselves Ahmadis or by any other name, who directly or indirectly pose as Muslim, can face up to 3 years imprisonment and a fine. Most of these offences, should be found, are only granted bail at the very discretion of the court, and these offences can be pursued by the police without any need for a warrant for arrest. In their report of November 2015, entitled On Trial, the Implementation of Pakistan's Blasphemy Laws, the International Commission of Jurists challenged the very vague and unfair nature of these laws, picking up on the impact that they have on various religious communities, including Ahmadiyyas. The vague wording of section, I will quote directly from their report, the vague wording of section 295C has particularly affected members of the Ahmadiyya community. In some cases, judges have interpreted the expression of religious beliefs by Ahmadis as understood by the court as a form of blasphemy in court. The report mentions several cases, but most disturbingly of all, the report that, quote, Justice Mian Nazir Akhtar, who is reported to have made public statements calling for the killers of blasphemers, was a member of the bench, end quote. So he is dispensing justice while also having these beliefs and having encouraged people to kill those found to be blaspheming. These views are absolutely appalling and should have no place in any justice system around the world. According to a campaign website that the Ahmadiyya community have set up called stopthepersecution.org, several Ahmadi Muslims have been attacked and buildings and monuments have been desecrated and destroyed since the criminalisation of the faith in 1984. And this includes several hundred people being killed, assaulted, 65 Ahmadi Muslims denied denied burial in a Muslim cemetery, 83 mosques destroyed, sealed or forcibly occupied, 52 mosques being banned from construction in the first place, and distressingly 39 Ahmadi bodies being exhumed after burial. These incidents are going largely unpunished in the Pakistan legal system, Mr Brady. It's clear that those who perpetrate such acts can do so with the tacit agreement of the state. The member for Mitcham and Morden mentioned the case of the family whose home was burnt down while they were inside it. And the lady Mushabara Jara, who survived the attack but lost the baby she was carrying, her two nieces, and her mother dying of smoke inhalation. The incident which sparked this seems to have been from a blasphemous Facebook post, it was claimed, by an Ahmadi youth. It seems absolutely incredible that somebody making a comment on social media could result in the burning down of people's homes and the attacking of a community. But this is just a picture of the discrimination that this community faces in Pakistan. During the attack, it is said that the police also did very little to intervene, and there hasn't been much justice since then either. It's a desperately worrying situation. It was also mentioned earlier on in the debate by several people about Mr Tahir Mahdi Imtaz, who's been detained for almost a year now without charge for allegedly publishing blasphemous materials. This is a violation, again, of Article 9 of the Declaration of Human Rights, where you should not have arbitrary detention or arrest without charge. And my understanding from what I have read is that he's still not yet been bailed or a trial date set. Mr Brady, the anti-blasphemy laws in Pakistan allow for wide-ranging complaints against persons, and it's reported that this is often used against the Ahmadiyya community as well as other religious minorities in the country. This government, I would hope, would agree with me that this is unacceptable, and I would like to see this government using the influence that we have in our long-standing relationships with Pakistan in many different ways to challenge the government of Pakistan to change this position and to scrap this very unfair, unjust and discriminatory law. Pakistan is ostensibly supporting the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, so it must fit in with that and remove the anti-Ahmadi laws from its constitution. Thank you.
We now move on to the three wind-up speeches. I call Tasmina Ahmed Sheikh.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Chair. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. Can I also take the opportunity to welcome members of the Ahmadi community here to today's debate. You're most welcome. And also to thank the member for Mitcham and Morden for securing this debate in the first place. I'll also declare an interest with my friend as a member of the APBG for International Freedom of Religion of Belief too. I was going to start with a quote of Muhammad Ali Jinnah, but as is usually the case, the member from Bradford West has stolen my thunder before I've even begun. But I will make reference to your speech later on in my remarks. The member for Mitcham Morden talked through a number of specific cases which were of great interest in relation to human rights and issues in Pakistan relative to voting, the blasphemy laws and the rights to religious freedom, and called upon the UK government to seek immediate release of Mr Imtiaz and Mr Shakur, and we are hoping indeed to hear from the Minister in that respect. An excellent point was made in relation to the use of the deferred budget in Pakistan, and I was in Pakistan just last year and attended a number of meetings with ministers there and can assure all of those here today and beyond that issues of persecution of minority people of minority faith, minority religions and communities was brought up at every single meeting, and I think it's important and look forward to hearing from the Minister ensuring that the deferred budget can be used to greater effect in that respect. The member also mentioned Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif's remarks regarding being the Prime Minister for all of Pakistan. And again, I'm looking forward to hearing from the Minister on how those words can be brought more to bear in a practical sense. We then heard from the Honourable Member for Congleton, who spoke also about the Minister for Minorities of Pakistan, who was also here recently, who spoke of his brother and also quoted Muhammad Ali Jinnah, a well-quoted person here today, and also spoke of the plight of minority women. And as is always the case, women are always disproportionately affected in such issues. We then heard from my friend, the Honourable Member for Rutherglen, who thanked the MD community with whom she's been engaging in her constituency, again speaking about issues of the electoral register which are resulting in disenfranchisement of people, which is something we should be working hard to guard against. The Honourable Member for Sutton, she made a number of excellent points, and I pay tribute to your pronunciation of Assalamu alaikum, which is one of the best I have heard. You spoke of the wide interpretation of blasphemy laws, which always contributes to persecution if there is such wide interpretation available, and you also made reference to being a member of the UK delegation to the Council of Europe, which I enjoy with you, and it's a very important forum for raising issues of human rights, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of all the delegation to assure all of those here and beyond that we will make sure that human rights is central to all that we do. We heard from the Honourable Member for Strangford, Chair of the APPG, on freedom of religious belief, and I've spoken with the Honourable Member at a number of debates, a very passionate advocate of religious freedom indeed, and spoke of the importance of all of us in reaching out to all religions. Important point I think he made was a voice for the voiceless, a very important term to use. We then heard from the Honourable Member for Birmingham Selly Oak, who spoke of beyond Pakistan and indeed persecution of the Ahmadiyya community in Indonesia and Bulgaria, which we are also looking forward to hearing from the Minister in respect of in his response. The Honourable Member for Scunthorpe referred to women and young girls facing discrimination due to the style of hijab that they wear, and again that distinguishes them and then obviously leaves them open to further opportunities for persecution. The Honourable Member for Bradford West, as I said, quoted Muhammad Ali Jinnah, but I will add one more quote which is in relation to women, which is extremely important as we speak of the father of the nation of Pakistan, who said, and I quote, "No nation can ever be worthy of its existence that cannot take its women along with the men. No struggle can ever succeed without women participating side by side with men. There are two powers in the world, one is the sword and the other is the pen. There is a great competition and rivalry between the two, but there is a third power stronger than both, and that is of women." And I again would implore the government of Pakistan to remember the words of the founding father of the nation and put them into practice in relation to women and minority communities across Pakistan. Honourable Member for Bradford West made the point, if you believe in justice, you must speak for all who are facing injustice. A very excellent point, and I would add to that, no one equality is more important or more virtuous than another, and that should be at the forefront of our thinking. Finally, we heard from my honourable friend, the member for Glasgow Central, who's engaging very actively with members in the MD community, running races and the like. Very, very impressive indeed. But it's a demonstration of how, when we engage with our minority communities, what we get back is so much more than we even give, and it demonstrates how we must continue to do so. Just in a final few points I'd like to make before closing my remarks. There have been a number of questions raised and asked of DFID actually in relation to the promotion of religious tolerance, and an answer from Desmond Swain from the Department of International Development was welcome, because it mentioned that DFID supports the rights of all groups to follow their religious faith and to live safe lives, and wherever possible programmes in Pakistan seek to ensure that is the case. Now, I welcome that most recently the head of DFID in Pakistan raised this issue in October as part of the bilateral assistance talks, and I'm keen that that type of engagement should continue because it's necessary. But I would ask the Minister in his remarks if he might let us know what level and proportion of the UK's development funding in Pakistan is invested in such projects. I asked a parliamentary question about the makeup of the Community Engagement Forum, which was set up a little while ago in relation to sort of community cohesion across these islands, and the Home Office confirmed that a number of members of the MD community were represented on the Prime Minister's Community Engagement Forum. Farid Ahmed from the Ahmadiyya Muslim Association and Farooq Aftab, the General Secretary from the Ahmadiyya Muslim Youth Association, both welcome appointments indeed. The debate pack produced by the House of Commons Library, which you will all have had access to and seen, is extensive, but details a number of parliamentary questions and answers on similar types of topics that have been raised raised in this debate today. But what none of those answers actually contain is any evidence that the pressure brought to bear by the UK government in Pakistan on issues relating to the persecution of religious minorities has had any positive effect. So I'm hoping in the Minister's response we'll be able to hear some words that will offer encouragement to those of us who have participated in today's debate, and indeed members of the MD community who are listening to the debate today. So I would say that on behalf of the SNP, we are of course opposed to religious persecution. Religious freedoms are a fundamental human right, and we are disappointed that the Pakistani government continues to condone and conduct religiously motivated attacks. And we call upon the Foreign Secretary to press the government of Pakistan to take action against all religious persecution. Pakistan should, and it's a point raised when we were there with the British Council, reform its blasphemy laws, which are incompatible with the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which it has signed. And we call, finally, on the Foreign Secretary to take further steps to stop the death penalty in Pakistan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brady, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. It doesn't seem very long ago that I was sitting on that side of the table, and it was also a pleasure to serve under the chairmanship of Mr. Turner, who has now left. I am very grateful to my honourable friend for Mitcham and Morden for introducing this important debate today. Religious intolerance and persecution should have no place anywhere in the world today, but unfortunately, as we've heard so clearly this afternoon, it does, and it is a matter of huge regret that those countries, especially the country we're discussing this afternoon, Pakistan, continues to persecute minorities, not just the Ahmadiyya Muslims, but other minorities too. This afternoon, as well as the powerful opening speech from my honourable friend for Mitcham and Morden, we heard from, I hope I can call her my honourable friend for Congleton, with whom I served recently on the International Development Committee, who always stands up for the rights of Christians and other minorities in other countries of the world, but also draws to our attention the plight of women and girls so often suffering along with the persecution of minorities. We then heard from the Honourable Member for Rutherglen and Hamilton, who made a very powerful and very well-researched speech. The Honourable Gentleman for Sutton and Cheam, who clearly is an expert and who takes a great passion and interest in matters of persecution and religious freedom. My honourable friend, the member for Strangford, who I know is a champion for the rights not just of Christians, but other countries where their Christians are minorities and other minority religious communities. My honourable friend, the member for Birmingham Selly-Oak, who always speaks so well on any issues related to home affairs, especially that of discrimination. My honourable friend for Scunthorpe, he and I have worked very closely on many issues to do with the persecution of minorities, and not just religious minorities. And we've travelled, indeed, to India together to see the plight of the Tibetan Buddhist community there. And my honourable friend for Bradford West, my near neighbour, as I'm a member in Leeds, who spoke so powerfully from personal knowledge and understanding about the persecution of Ahmadiyya Muslims and the state of Pakistan today. The Honourable Member for Glasgow Central, again, who spoke about her communities that she represents and is proud to represent, and suffer the kind of persecution that we've heard so much of today. And finally, of course, a very good summing up speech from the spokesperson for the SNP, the member for Ochil and South Perthshire. Now, we also had some very relevant interventions from the member for Worley, member from Harrow West, and the member from Warwick and Leamington, I think, all of whom are no longer in their place. Mr. Brady, in Pakistan today, religious freedom is consistently trampled upon by state laws, as we've heard so clearly. And, of course, sectarian violence arises from that. There have been calls by the United States government agencies, such as the US Commission on International Freedom, to designate Pakistan a country of concern, with the possibility of the USA removing its aid to Pakistan. In this country, in the UK, the Home Office and civil society groups such as Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International have documented persistent and increasing sectarian violence against religious minorities in Pakistan. The Washington Post in April 2013 stated that Pakistan now tops the worst list for religious freedom. Mr. Brady, Ahmadiyya Muslims are particularly targeted for persecution, as we've heard from so many speakers this afternoon, with laws restricting the practice of their religion and used often to threaten and harass them. The Honourable Member for Mitcham and Morden stated that it is shocking that the persecution of this community is enshrined by law, and it certainly is shocking to all of us in this room, all of us who are Democrats and believe in religious freedom. Approximately 95% of the population of Pakistan are Muslims, 70% Sunni, 25% Shia, with Christians making about 1.5% of the population, Hindus around 2%, Ahmadis are approximately, according to some statistics, 0.2 of 1%. However, the exact number of Ahmadiyya Muslims in Pakistan is disputed, and it's estimated to be between 600,000 and 2 million. We've heard this afternoon, Mr. Brady, that Pakistan has repressive blasphemy laws and has enshrined in law and the Constitution legislation and amendments that specifically target the Ahmadis. But the Pakistani government has failed to take up its own Supreme Court recommendations in 2014 in relation to violence against religious minorities and the proposal to form a special police force to monitor sectarian violence. The Pakistani government has also failed to amend or repeal blasphemy law provisions that provide the pretext for violence against religious violence, and militant groups continue to attack those religious minorities. Human Rights Watch in 2015 stated that, and I quote, "The failure to prosecute or imprison suspects of religious violence is in part due to the sympathy for some groups within the security forces." And we've heard also that Hindu women are victims often of forced conversions and forced marriages because Pakistani law does not recognise Hindu marriages. The main justification for state action against religious minorities and the vigilante justification for sectarian violence are those very blasphemy laws enshrined in Pakistani law. And blasphemy is considered by the state and by many Pakistanis as basically, quote, the defiling of the Prophet Muhammad. And as my honourable friend for Scunthorpe said, Section 295C of the Penal Code of Pakistan states, and I quote, "Use of derogatory remarks, etc., in respect of the Holy Prophet, whether by words, either spoken or written by visible representations, or by imputation, innuendo, or insinuation, directly or indirectly defiles the sacred name of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, shall be punishable with death, imprisonment for life, and shall be liable to fine." In 1986, the blasphemy laws were reformulated and capital punishment was prescribed as the maximum punishment. However, no one, thank goodness, as yet has been executed for blasphemy. Blasphemy allegations are often false, as we've heard, and are often used to promote violence against religious minorities. In 2015, Mr. Brady, our Home Office said there is clear evidence that the legislation is used by non-state actors in Pakistan to threaten and harass Ahmadis. Victims of attacks by non-state actors are unable to seek effective state protection from authorities. The Pakistani government has consistently failed to repeal those blasphemy laws that provide the pretext for violence against those religious minorities. And in 2014, there was a record 1,400 cases of people arrested for blasphemy in Pakistan. In 2015, there were 17 people convicted of blasphemy, and those are now on death row. 19 others are serving life sentences. Blasphemy laws have nothing to do with blasphemy and are often used to settle petty disputes and personal vendettas. Accusations of blasphemy are usually the only pretense needed for vigilante groups to attack religious minorities in Pakistan. Saima Baig, a Karachi-based environmentalist, wrote in the Huffington Post recently, and we've already heard this case, a man named Abdus Salam, who was an Ahmadi, won the Nobel Prize for Physics in 1979. The anti-Ahmadi sentiment is so inherent that Pakistan even refuses to acknowledge its only other Nobel laureate. Of course, the other one is Malala Yousafzai, as my honourable friend from Seliouk mentioned. His persecution, that's Abdus Salam's persecution, led to him leaving the country. And we, this is Saima Beg talking, we rewarded him by desecrating his grave. In a separate article on religious persecution in Pakistan, Saima Beg said, the state of Pakistan must really think about whether it wants to join the rest of the world in the current century and promulgate and implement laws that provide security and safety to its citizens. This is the responsibility of the state, and it must not be allowed to shirk it in the name of religion. Pakistan must do away with instituting 7th century laws that have no basis in today's society. It is not hard to do this. In Deutsche Welle in November last year, a report was made about an attack on Saturday, the 21st of November 2015, when an angry mob in the eastern Punjab province set ablaze a factory owned by Ahmadis after one of its employees was accused of desecrating the Holy Quran. Deutsche Welle says the incident took place after we arrested the head of security at the factory, Kamar Ahmed Tahir, for complaints that he ordered the burning of Qurans. Adnan Malik, a senior police officer in the Jhelum city, told the media. We registered a blasphemy case against Tahir, who is Ahmadi by faith, and arrested him after confiscating the burnt material, which also included copies of the Quran, Malik said. According to local media, after the arrests, hundreds of people descended upon the factory, setting it on fire. A spokesman for the local Ahmadi community said 3 of their members were detained by the police on blasphemy charges. A day later, on Sunday, Muslim protesters attacked and occupied an Ahmadi mosque in a town near Jhelum as an act of, quote, revenge for the factory incident. A mob attacked our mosque in Kala Gujaran, an area in Jhelum, took out its furniture and set it on fire. Then they washed the mosque and later offered evening prayers in the mosque, Amir Mahmood, a member of the Ahmadi community, said. Rights activists say that a cleric of a Muslim mosque in the area had urged the people to punish the blasphemers. They also accuse the local administration and the police of not preventing both attacks on the minority group, reports Deutsche Welle. On this side of the House, as I'm sure on all sides of the House, we believe in freedom of religion, not just in the United Kingdom, but throughout the world. The freedom to worship without fear or persecution. And there is not a member in this room and in this House who would oppose that. I want to, in my closing remarks, Mr. Brady, just pay tribute to Mohammed Naya, the Secretary for External Affairs of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Association of Leeds, who recently came to the Sinai Synagogue in Roundhay, in my Leeds North East constituency, to speak to the Leeds Jewish community about his and his community's experience in Pakistan. And after his speech, I was very privileged to be presented with a copy of the Holy Quran by Mr. Naya. It was the first time he'd been to a synagogue, and he remarked how similar it was in many ways to his own mosque. And finally, if I may, Mr. Brady, a quotation. And the quotation is this. But then eject them forever from this country. For, as we have heard, God's anger with them is so intense that gentle mercy will only tend to make them worse and worse, while sharp mercy will reform them but little. Therefore, in any case, away with them. And that was said by Martin Luther in 1543, writing about the Jews, but it could be said about the Ahmadiyya Muslims in Pakistan.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Brady, and it's a pleasure to work under your chairmanship today. I firstly confess I have a terrible cold, so I think my speech will read better than it will sound, but I do apologise, and I hope honourable members will bear with me. I think this has been a phenomenal debate, a very important debate, and I pay tribute to the incredible contributions that have been made with passion, with expertise, with determination to raise this important issue. Many questions have been raised. I will do my best to answer a number of themes that have actually come up, but as I've pledged in the past, and I hope committed to, I will write to honourable members with more details if I do not have the opportunity to cover everything to the extent that honourable members expect. But I begin, as others have done, in congratulating the honourable member for Mitcham and Morden on securing this very worthwhile debate. And I think the standard of this debate reflects, and as was outlined by the spokesman for the Labour Party, this House's close interest in human rights issues, not just in this country, but across the world. And that is absolutely right. And I think this country also has a proud reputation of defending the rights of minorities. Minorities like the Yazidis in Iraq and indeed in Syria, the Baha'i in Iran, and also the Buddhists and the Rohingya Muslims in Burma. We have stood up for individuals like Mariam Ibrahim in Sudan, who was raised as a Muslim, but she chose to follow and marry into the Christian faith. And for that choice, she was punished, charged with hypocrisy and adultery, imprisoned with a young son while heavily pregnant. So today, with intolerance very much on the rise, we see reports of anti-Semitic and anti-Christian attacks even here in Europe now. It is especially important that we stand up for the right of people to freely express their faith, or indeed to have no faith at all. So I very much welcome this opportunity, Mr. Brady, to debate the specific issues of religious minorities in Pakistan, which I do not recall the House actually has discussed any time whilst I've been Minister for the Middle East, North Africa and Southeast Asia. My honourable friend for Sutton Cheam raised the important role and indeed the contribution that the diaspora plays in this country, and then others have mentioned it as well. And that is so important to recognise that, and I'm glad it's been expressed here today. Now, before going into the details, I'd just like to say on the outset that we have a very strong and very powerful and important relationship with Pakistan. We have a historical one. They are a close ally in the Commonwealth, and we have a commercial relationship as well now, bilateral trade moving towards £3 billion. There are shared security interests that we have in the region, and there's, as I mentioned, a massive diaspora relationship we have with thousands of people moving backwards and forwards from Pakistan to this country every single month. But as Honourable Member for Bradford West said, and I think she gave a very powerful speech in commenting on this, this is an important country that has made progress over the last numbers of decades and gone through a very difficult period of moving from military governance to civilian governance. And there, I think we should applaud and encourage that continued path in that direction. And that is absolutely important to recognise where they have come from. But our relationship does then mean that we can have those frank conversations, those important conversations about some of the other aspects of detail that we've discussed here today. And that's where we are with our relationship. And so I begin to address some of the challenges that we face, knowing that Pakistan is a friend, but very much friends should be able to say these things and place them on the record as matters of concern. Now, I know that the All-Parliamentary Group for the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, which is led by the Honourable Member, does a great deal of valuable work to support the beleaguered Ahmadiyya minority in many countries across the world, and it's not just Pakistan that we're dealing with, other countries have been mentioned as well. And can I pay tribute to the work and the committee has actually done, and we met, I think, on the 20th of January in order to discuss these very issues. And my honourable friend, the member for Congleton, and indeed the honourable member for Strangford, who's a regular at these debates on these matters, I admire and pay tribute to the leadership and chairmanship that you show, that has been shown here as well. It is very, very important that the All-Parliamentary Group and indeed the All-Parliamentary Group on International Freedom and Religion Belief works together and continues to bring these matters here to the fore, and we debate them in the House. Both groups discharge an invaluable service in reminding us of the vital importance of freedom of religion or belief. It is something that we in the UK are lucky enough to take for granted, but some people in other countries, as we heard today, are not able to do that. Religious minorities suffer more than most, and it is right that we should speak up for them on their behalf if we see evidence that their voices are not being heard and their rights are being denied. So today's debate, unfortunately, is a sad reminder of the persecution suffered by the Ahmadiyya Muslims in Pakistan. And as has been said, the Pakistani constitution actually discriminates against them. They struggle to exercise their right to vote. And this is because they have to place a religion on the actual ballot paper itself, on the list itself. And because that religion is not recognised, then they are denied that ability to vote. And indeed on the issue of education as well, brought up by the Honourable Member for Scunthorpe, denied education for the same reasons. They face arbitrary detention, their literature is banned, their mosques are attacked, and as has been said by the Honourable Member for Rotherglen and indeed others, their minarets are also destroyed as well. The Honourable Member, the spokesman for Scotland, for Scotnats, also talked about the lack of justice that is taking place there as well. And last year's Foreign and Commonwealth Office annual Human Rights Report detailed cases of extremists specifically targeting the Ahmadiyya Muslims. The report highlighted the case of an Ahmadiyya man who was shot and killed after a Muslim leader denounced the Ahmadiyya as enemies of Pakistan on a popular television show. And I'm sorry to say that it's not just the Ahmadiyya Muslim community who experience persecution. Shia, Hazara, Christian and other religious communities also face intimidation and violence. Forced conversion and marriage attacks on places of worship, sectarian killings, all these appalling abuses continue to take place. The misuse of blasphemy laws against Muslims and members of other religious minorities, for example Christians, which can lead to mob violence or potential use of the death penalty of the victim, is a particular concern. And a stark example of this is the case of Mrs. Asia Bibi, a Christian lady who was accused of blasphemy after drinking water from the same bowl as a Muslim woman. She is facing persecution after 5 years on death row. People in her own village, including religious leaders, have publicly stated that they would kill her if she is released. And I continue to follow Mrs. Bibi's appeal process very closely indeed. So this government, Mr. Brady, deplores violations of the right of the freedom of religion or belief, wherever they occur. We regularly urge the government of Pakistan to honour its international commitments and guarantee fully the human rights of all Pakistan citizens. And the scale of the challenge that is facing Pakistan is illustrated in the film Malala, which I saw a couple of months ago. And I say, Mr. Brady, I had the honour to meet her. She spoke in the Syria conference last week, highlighting again the plight of the minorities. And I think it was an honour to have her at that conference.
Will the Honourable Friend do that?
I will do.
I wonder if the Minister agrees with me that at this time, especially when we have an unstable world, an unstable region, that it's really important, as the Minister has said, that we act as a critical friend to Pakistan and really work with them to make sure that they can be stable within their own country to progress.
My honourable friend makes a very, very important point, and I will come on to the role that DFID is playing as one of the countries that we invest an awful lot of money in. And there's been a lot of questions to say that should that funding be conditional? And I will address those issues, but he makes a very valid point. But we are a friend of Pakistan. We want to work with Pakistan, but that does allow us to highlight these areas and make sure we continue that there is an advancement. Of course.
Can I say, I'm sorry, I can see what trouble the Minister is in. Just to ask whether he might, I'm not unclear as to whether the Governor of Punjab has been to the UK or is about to come to the UK. If he's been, was the government able to raise the issues of Ahmadis in his region? If he's about to come, would he include that in those discussions?
I met the Governor of Punjab. He happens to be the brother of the Prime Minister and therefore has access to the power base. I met the governor prior to the opportunity of meeting the APPG, so I didn't raise specifically the plight of the Ahmadiyyan communities, but I did raise other matters as well. And the plan is that I'll be visiting the country in the near future. But I should say that I, the Foreign Secretary and others, have taken many opportunities to raise this particular issues and the plight of other minorities in the country as well. I should say that, Mr. Brady, our High Commissioners are just going through a changeover. And this morning I met up with Tom Drew, who's the next High Commissioner, about to depart to Pakistan, to Islamabad, and we discussed these very, very issues. So he's aware of the concern and the fact that this debate was happening today. We've also raised it with the High Commissioner, Pakistani High Commissioner in London, and I assure her that the next time I do meet the Chief Minister of Punjab, I will certainly be raising it with him as well. I certainly will.
So thank you and I understand your voice is under some pressure. We can appreciate that. I just want to gently say as well, we know there's going to be a report coming from the APPG and Freedom and Religious Belief, which will be the Pakistan inquiry. I think, Minister, it might be helpful for you to have a copy of that. So if you're happy with that, whenever we get the chance, we'll ensure that you have a copy of the report, which was chaired by Lord Alton of the other place. And I think maybe it might be helpful when it comes to presenting the case on behalf of all those Pakistan religious minorities.
Well, I'd be very, very grateful for that, and thank you very much indeed for that offer. So in August last year, in addition to the conversations that I've just been mentioned, the Foreign Secretary expressed our concerns about religious freedom and the misuse of the blasphemy laws, which come, I think, at the core of what we're actually discussing here, as to how there's misused. And I think a concern that we actually have is the fact that sometimes judges are not willing to enforce those blasphemy laws for concerns for their own safety. And this is a maturity of the justice system that we need to encourage and need to further advance. I was, I have to say, impressed by the Pakistani High Commissioner to the UK, Syed Abbas. I'm impressed on the Pakistani High Commissioner this importance of not just the religious minorities in Pakistan, but I also stress the importance of the Ahmadiyya community, the Shia, the Hazara, and the Christian minorities, many of which these issues we've debated here in this and the main chamber. But we also work through the European Union to promote human rights overseas. For example, the EU Preferential Market Access Scheme has helped incentivise progress on human rights in Pakistan. And this has led to the creation of a cell to help with the implementation of international human rights obligations. And Pakistan has submitted overdue UN treaty reports and re-established a government ministry specifically to lead on human rights. And this, I think, is a very important and welcome development. This progress is encouraging, but we cannot be complacent. And we recognise the need to maintain the pressure on the government of Pakistan to honour its commitments to human rights, and we will continue to do that. Just turning to some of the other matters that have been raised, firstly on the issues of international aid. Aid is not done on a national basis, it's actually done on a federal basis. So we discuss these matters with the various chief ministers, and as honourable members know, this is not a Foreign Office lead as such, but I will promise honourable members to meet with the DFID minister in order to look more closely to make sure that we can see that aid is properly distributed in the country. But honourable members will be very aware that actually we have had a proud legacy of making sure that aid goes to the vulnerable people and is not tied somehow or in conditionality. The problems with placing conditions on the aid that we receive, the money that we actually give, is that you could actually deny it to the very vulnerable people that you would actually want to be supporting. So we need to look at cognitive measures which will enhance and encourage change, but also recognise that the DFID contribution to the country is immense indeed. I think it's one of the highest in the world.
Yes, I fully accept what he's saying about conditionality. The important issue that I would ask him to raise with DFID ministers is the fact that religious discrimination is a root cause of poverty. as we have demonstrated today in this chamber, and that to date, DFID ministers, in my opinion, if I may express it, have not sufficiently addressed this as a cause of poverty in the way that other issues have been addressed for fear of appearing to discriminate. And I think that is a hurdle in thinking that we need to overcome.
My honourable friend raises a very important point as to what the criteria is in order for aid to be advanced to a country. The ODA, the DAC, the Development Committee that focuses on these things, wrote these rules back in the 1950s, and aid, overseas development support was written in the aftermath of the Second World War, designed to focus on poverty itself. But we know today that instability is also directly linked to the cause of poverty. But the rules have not changed, and I've been encouraging, and we're slowly moving towards that direction, to encourage change. These rules need to be updated and advanced in order to recognise that actually there are other ways of ensuring that poverty can be tackled by providing the stability, improved governance, so they are making the better decisions in order to move the country forward and alleviate a country of the challenges of poverty as well. A number of honourable members mentioned that not just Pakistan, but we spoke about the wider issues, and I think this is something we spoke of when we met with the APPG. Bulgaria was mentioned as well. And there's a sort of, this raises eyebrows. This is a country in Europe, part of the European Union. Why on earth are we seeing this sort of persecution in this country as well? And I raised this with my right honourable friend, the Europe Minister, and he is pursuing this on his angle, and I will ask him to be in touch with the Honourable Lady in order to provide an update of what's going on. I am aware, though, that it is the Grand Mufti in Bulgaria that is very influential in these circumstances, and I think we need to work harder, particularly as there are essentially a European part of the European community, in order to make sure that persecution of this community doesn't actually happen so close to where we are itself. A couple other countries were also mentioned, indeed Thailand, and where we continue to work with UNHCR on a wide range of refugee issues, but also to do with persecution as well. And again, if I may write to honourable members with more details of what is happening on that front, again, it was raised at the APPG. And then finally, Indonesia as well. Our ambassador in Jakarta has discussed these issues, including the plight of the Ahmadiyya community, with the Minister of Religious Affairs, and has urged him and indeed other community leaders to ensure that the rights of individuals and the practice of religion of belief are free and respected and indeed protected. I understand a bill is now going through based on the protection of religious and faith communities, and I hope that will be a major step, a major advancement in Indonesia, but we need to keep the pressure on and keep working on this. Mr. Brady, to conclude, I would like to thank once again the Honourable Member for Mitcham and Morden for... Yes, of course.
I apologise for extending the Minister's time on his feet, but would he address the issue raised by my right honourable friend from East Ham about the forum, the Religious Interfaith Forum, that was set up by the Foreign Office under the last coalition government, but doesn't seem to have been reset up at this time?
I did ask for a note on this to see where this was going. If I may, I will write to the Honourable Lady. I'm not familiar with where things are at the moment, and it would be wrong for me to place something on the record without the actual details. But the importance of it has been raised. Her point is on the record, and I'll write to her with more details as to where that actually is. To conclude, Mr. Brady, thank you very much indeed for the opportunity to place these important aspects on the record, but also to place into context the work that the government is doing in order to place pressure on Pakistan, one of our important allies, to advance its views on dealing with this issue of the persecution of the Ahmadiyya and indeed other religions in other groups in Pakistan and other countries as well. I can assure honourable members that we will continue to take every opportunity, indeed when I next meet the Chief Minister I will raise this, to raise the concerns. Our aim is, of course, that one day everyone, indeed everywhere, whatever their faith or belief, will enjoy the rights that we in this country take for granted. Thank you.
Final response, I think, from the Honourable Lady who moved the motion. Siobhan MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr Brady, and thank you for your chairmanship. May I warmly thank every member who's contributed to this debate, and I think there are in excess of 16. When I discovered that we had the Thursday afternoon before recess slot, I thought, oh dear. I thought that I would be actually bringing the Lahore telephone book with me in an effort to fill some time. But I am sure everybody agree that we have had tremendous contributions and moving contributions from members representing nearly all the parties in this House, and I really thank you for that. And I thank the Ahmadiyya community for encouraging that amount of interest and support of what is a relatively small community in our country, but that punches always so far. Probably the wrong word to say punches in a community that is not violent, but punches above its weight and really gets involved in its community and about its issues at home. So thank you to those all involved. We've heard of the many dimensions of persecution of the Ahmadiyya community, but also about other religious minorities in Pakistan. And I hope that our discussion will mark the beginning, not the end, of the UK government's consideration of what it can do to end religious persecution in Pakistan. Like many other groups that have sought refuge in the UK, the Ahmadiyya community gives so much back to this country. It is a great champion of charitable causes and promotes peace, cohesion and understanding in our communities. But these Ahmadiyyas are fearful for their families, loved ones, friends and fellow community members back in Pakistan, whose lives remain at risk if they openly practice their faith. And as anti-Ahmadi sentiment becomes more pervasive across borders, we are increasingly seeing discrimination in other countries too. As our debate today has demonstrated, the extent to which Ahmadis cannot access justice, enfranchisement or equal treatment in Pakistan cannot be underestimated. The persecution they face is simply intolerable in this day and age. The UK is proud to have Pakistan as a close ally, something which we all commend and celebrate. But this relationship also requires the UK to make it clear that the rights for Ahmadis and all religious groups to have the freedom to practice their religion without fear is fundamental. The UK government, and indeed this House, has a strong moral responsibility to encourage freedom of religion and freedom of speech, not just within our own borders, but internationally. These are not just British values, but are universal human rights. I look forward to the Minister and the UK government taking a more proactive approach to promote what should be absolutely universal, the Ahmadi message of love for all, hatred for none. A message that still endures despite the persecution of Ahmadis, and a message we can all share. Thank you.
Considered the persecution of Ahmadiyya Muslims and other religious minorities in Pakistan. Does any of that opinion say aye? Aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order.